Let's make a sports poster composition using some big featured text. Start by making a new Photoshop document. Let's stick with our vertical format, 1080 by 1350. And let's start with our background layer. We're just gonna drag in this clouds background I found on unsplash.com. And now for our text, we're gonna write out Goff in big blue letters. This is the last name of Nate Goff, the player that we'll be featuring today. And I'm just going to scale this up almost to the edges of the document, but leaving some margins and then centering everything. And now we'll drag in our player cutout. There's Nate Goff. And you can kind of position him in the middle. One technique you could do is give the cutout a drop shadow and move it away from his body, like increase this distance a good amount. You can shift the angle, and that kind of gives it this nice pop out 3D effect that you can do with big feature text. So this would be good for like a game day graphic or a sports poster like this one for a specific player. For this image, because we have the clouds in the background, I don't like how the shadow is resting on the clouds. Ideally, the sun would be in the sky and it'd be coming at us rather than light here coming at the player. So I'm gonna go a different route, and I'm gonna brighten up the space behind Goff. So I'm gonna kind of make like a fake sun almost. I'm gonna do this with just a big white brush just right in the middle there. And we can take this big white spot and set the blend mode to overlay. That's gonna brighten up the image in that spot. And now if we also wanna get some of that white effect, we can duplicate it, set the blend mode to normal, and then reduce the opacity a little bit to however bright we want it to be. Now let's add his first name to the image, Nate. So I'm gonna make a new layer and we'll draw a rectangle with our rectangle tool, and we will use the secondary color for Chicago, this light blue, so we can see it on Goff. I'm just gonna center it on his name there, and then duplicate Goff, write Nate, let's go caps, and now I'm just sizing it down to fit this rectangle the best we can. And now we have his full name, and I'm gonna group these layers together and make a folder for them, because now we're gonna blend this text into the background. This is something that's particularly effective when you have clouds. If you want some of those clouds to bleed through the image, all you gotta do is click this dead space in the gray area by the layer, and we're gonna mess with these blend if settings. So we want the underlying layer, the clouds, to show through, and because clouds are white, we're gonna split this white selector here by holding Option and clicking, and now moving this in, you see how the clouds are starting to bleed through into the text layers that we've grouped together. So let's keep it about there. And you can see how like they're not bleeding through quite all the way yet. I didn't want to go overboard. So the next step we can do is mask this text group. And I'm just gonna take away some of this blue, some of the G in Goff, so we get the full cloud going over it. And now we can also move the cloud image around. You can see like it's showing through different letters, but we're gonna keep it as is because we did that masking. And we might mask some more above the O here, and maybe above the F as well. Now for our next step, let's mess with the coloring of our cutout a little bit, and let's add a curves layer. We're gonna have this just affecting Nate Goff, so let's hold Option and click to create that clipping mask. Now he's like pretty dark and contrasted compared to the background. We wanna lighten him up a little bit, so I'm gonna lift his dark tones by moving this slider up, and then maybe we wanna increase the midtones a little bit too, so he's getting a little bit brighter. And that looks pretty good. Now we can also give them this blur effect, like he has jumped up to this point. So what we'll do is we'll duplicate this layer and move it below him. So duplicating the Nate Goff layer. And now let's go up to our filter, go to blur and motion blur. And motion blur is what it sounds like. It'll create a blur in a direction of your choosing. So we're just going to keep it vertical 90 degrees and then however much distance we want. So let's go with 276. And we don't really need the blur up here, so I'm going to create a mask on this blur layer and mask out with a black brush this top part of the blur. So we really just want the focus to be on his legs and then I guess his arm coming up as well. Next, we'll add his team logo at the top of the image, Chicago Union. So we'll kind of go top and bottom with logo and signature and team name on the bottom. So get this logo sized up and centered. And see how it's not really showing through that well on this background? Let's go ahead and mask out some of the background up top here. So maybe not that much, but I'm just taking a soft brush and making it a little bit brighter up here so we can see that logo better. Finally, we'll add his signature to the bottom. We're gonna make up a signature for him using a font. So we're gonna use Aaron is the name of the font. And we'll type out his name, Nate Goff. Shrink that down, center it. And now we will add Chicago Union below it. And we'll go back to our Montserrat font. I always try to keep my font usage pretty minimal or pretty consistent throughout a graphic. I probably won't go more than like 2 different fonts at any point. So we'll center that, drop that in there, and we'll stop there. That is one way you can create a cool featured text poster design.